welcome to the Red Rain Podcast. Here is your host from Revenge of the Birds, Walter Mitchell.
Thank you, Kyle Little Rock Ledbetter. Welcome in, Cardinal fans. Wow, what a night last night. And it's just suddenly feeling like a whole lot of clarity amidst a whole lot of confusion during the draft process regarding Marvin Harrison Jr. And as I'm starting to connect the dots, I'm wondering, as little pieces of information have come in and provided some more clarity. Here are my thoughts. Here's what I'm wondering. The news came in, a report came in that yesterday that the Cardinals had assured Marvin Harrison Jr. that no matter what, if he was there at number 4, they would take him. When that assurance came is unclear, but imagine if it came way back at the combine, or even prior to that, actually, because then it could explain why, and we heard rumors of Harrison getting assurances way back then before the combine, that if he had that assurance, then the Cardinals could have said, hey, look, don't bust your butt in the process. It's likely that we're going to go quarterback, and you'll be sitting there at 4. So, and we're telling you right now, we're going to take you. And, if you want, why not train for football? Get ready to join us because we believe you'll be there and we're going to take you. That would explain pretty much all the reasons why Marvin Harrison Jr. decided to, feel like he didn't have to participate in the drills at the combine. He didn't even elect to talk there, which was mystifying to certain degrees, and unprecedented, really, for a top draft pick who was present there. And then, the whole skipping the pro day, which created, I think that people from the outside, like myself, who were not privy to this or not understanding of this, it cast a bit of a question mark for some people. Not for everyone, clearly. But it created a bit of a mystique, if you will, and a lack of accessibility for NFL teams to look deeper into Marvin Harrison Jr., particularly seeing what he can do in the drills and the timings. And, I kept saying, this guy, could go in there and blow everybody out of the water, and make it a no-doubter, no-brainer that he would be maybe even the best player, most promising player in the entire draft. But given if he had the assurances of the Cardinals, and now hearing how effusive he is in his praise of the Cardinals and rejoining Paris Johnson Jr. and loving having to play with Kyler and for the coaching staff and just his pure excitement and joy for being a Cardinal is stunning and liberating for me, particularly because I was stewing along. What's going on here? I took the bait. If this was indeed the case, I took the bait because there was just cloud of uncertainty, and all these speculations that, with him not hiring an agent, could he, sue the NFL if he went to a team he didn't want to go to? That was nagging at me something fierce. And he still hasn't signed the NFLPA agreement, which would allow the NFL to control his name and likeness, particularly on jerseys. So right now, no one can order a Marvin Harrison Jr. jersey. And so, but man, I mean, if that was the case all along, so then people would say, well, then why then did Monty say we're open for business with a neon sign for trading out of 4? Well, that was I think part of the ruse, part of the clever strategy is that, in other words, if he's saying we're open for sale, that would cast doubt as to whether the Cardinals are convinced that Marvin Harrison Jr. is worthy for the stick and pick, right? But then, that was leaked out. The Cardinals are looking for 3 first-round draft picks. And, by pricing it that high, and I said at the time, I don't know what team's going to want to be on the other end of another Monty video of this great draft heist, maneuvering from the Cardinals headquarters. But then that rumor makes a lot of sense because, in other words, he was saying we're open, but at a premium price, and knowing that he already had committed to Harrison Jr. and he didn't think he was going to get an offer like that anyway. But why not high price it so that it made it less attractive for teams to come up? But the Patriots solved everything when they took Drake Maye at number 3, because then it tested the teams that might have been interested in J.J. McCarthy. And as it turns out, that interest in McCarthy was not as strong as some people thought. So Monty kind of had that all figured out, it would seem, and sort of figured that the quarterbacks would go 1, 2, 3, and that Marvin Harrison Jr. would be there.
I think that's why also they waited to say we won't trade the pick until we're on the clock, because if McCarthy was the pick at 3, there would have been at least 3 teams interested in Drake Maye. We know the Giants wanted to go get Drake Maye. We know the Vikings wanted to go get Drake Maye, and we know the Raiders wanted to go get Drake Maye.
There you go. You said it perfectly.
But for McCarthy, it was only the Vikings were the team that was interested. Hence why the Vikings, I know they traded up 1 pick from 11 to 10, but the Vikings didn't have to make this big jump to 5 or 6 because they knew nobody in that 5 to 9 range was interested in taking McCarthy, and nobody lower in the draft wanted to trade up to get McCarthy.
Well, that was the interesting wild card in all of this. It's just and Harbaugh saying McCarthy's the best quarterback in the draft. The hype around McCarthy, who, by the way, I think is going to be a really solid quarterback in the NFL. I'm not sure right away, but, I think he's got a package of skills, and I think he may be the toughest minded of the quarterbacks. I think he can stand up under the pressure about as well as any of them. But, it's just, and then to see last night, to just see how excited Marvin Harrison Jr. was, and that he showed up for this and was ready to go and took all the interviews. Finally, we got to hear from him directly. Felt like we were shielded from that the whole draft process. It felt so frustrating. And then that sort of strange video of his dad explaining the whole scenario, and Marvin Harrison Jr. getting 1 sentence in at the at the Ohio State, to the side of the Ohio State Pro Day. It just, I have to confess, I took, I was prime bait. it just created an angst for me. I'm not good with, you know, with, you know, cloudy scenarios. You know, it always makes me nervous. And, you know, if this was indeed the case, I mean, this type of commitment. Now, I have to be honest, I was told from very reliable people right from the beginning that not only was Marvin Harrison number one on the Cardinals board, he had been there for 2 years, and that they had a grade on him higher than any prospect that they have graded thus far in their 2 years. So, you know, but I'm starting to realize, oh my goodness, if you're going to pull something like this off, this would be the way to do it. I mean, if you're so convinced that this is your guy and this is the guy you want, wow. I mean, and the only thing that made me sort of curious too was why the Cardinals let the clock run down. Guess they wanted to do all the conversations first or whatever, but you know, I was just wondering, oh my goodness, are they really listening to trade talks? And I didn't know what to think right then, but I also felt like the interest from the Cardinals fans was too intense to ignore. And, you know, in this case, because the fans have been, you know, clamoring for Marvin Harrison Jr. for 2 years now. I mean, it's been an ongoing thing. And, you know, I mean, I understood the reasons why, you know, in terms of the prospect and the player. But then, you know, there were things along the way that just started nagging at me. Was great to see Bill Belichick break down Marvin Harrison on with Pat McAfee of all people, and seeing Belichick bonding with McAfee and agreeing to be on McAfee's show every Monday this next football season was amazing. And Bill Unplugged was really fun to watch. And he took us through Marvin Harrison and all the reasons why he thinks that Marvin Harrison could be a special player. But he also took us to that Michigan game where Marvin Harrison made some poor choices and put some poor effort on tape, which was nagging at me. But the way that Belichick talked about it was that, hey, look, these are the kind of plays you can't make in the NFL, but treated it as kind of like an isolated incident and not something to tarnish the whole, you know, evaluation, which I wasn't trying to let it do, but it still was bothering me that, particularly in the context of here's a player who has nothing to prove. That still, for any player, would bother me. You know, and the talk about this is a generational receiver. You know, I think there's the potential for that, but to say it as a you know, sort of established, you know, fait accompli before he's ever even set foot on an NFL practice field seems awfully premature, and I think uh, unwise to put on a young player of any magnitude. I mean, I'm of the Bill Parcells school of, you know, let's not crown his ass before anything's ever begun. And I always loved his quote of, potential means you haven't done shit yet. So, you know, I mean, we're talking about potential, and I just don't want to see Marvin Harrison, who already has enormous pressure to follow in his father's footsteps, being a legacy, you know, in that ways, there's a lot of pressure to it, and now he wants to carve out his own path and make his own unique stamp. But putting a player on a pedestal too early typically does not help, and it doesn't sit well with the football gods either. And as
Especially
they
when you
say,
factor into that this is the Arizona Cardinals we're talking about, and the greatest player in their franchise's history is in fact a wide receiver, and a wide receiver who hasn't been gone for that long at this point.
right. And, exactly. And, schematically, I'm really fascinated with, I think that the Cardinals are starting to get things right about how to approach the 21st century NFL offenses of attacking the middle of the field. And, um, but, also, if you look at it right now, is that, look at the taller targets that Kyler now has to work with. I mean, MHJ is 6'3". You got Trey McBride is 6'4". Elijah Higgins is 6'3", 6'4". There's three guys right there. The kid Moore they added is 6'2". Daniel Arias is 6'2", 6'3". I mean, they got a nice basketball team of receivers going right now, size wise, which is wonderful. And then you got the Greg Dortch factor from the slot, who's so dynamic and so excited to know. And I think they're going to add a wide receiver today, probably, or early on day 3. I think another one's coming. Probably more of a slot guy. Interesting to see the 49ers draft Pearsall. They want all their receivers to be completely versatile, and that fits their pattern. I mean, Pearsall's a slot guy. I mean, because they know they want to attack the middle of the football field. It was a curious choice. No one thought Pearsall would go in the first round, but he fits their kind of mold, and particularly with the uncertainty about Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, their futures in San Francisco. So that was interesting to see them make that call. But I don't want to talk about them. I don't want to talk about any other team. I want to stick to the Cardinals. And I'm just feel so relieved at this point to sense the clarity that I now feel. And, I'll be the first to admit it. I probably was overreacting to a lot of the stuff and, unnecessarily. But in my defense, I can only work with what they're giving me. And, the Cardinals love to be, like run up, covert ops. But this one might have been the most effective one ever, particularly if Marvin Harrison Jr. ends up balling for the Cardinals in a huge manner. I mean, and it removes all doubt for me as to why, he was very passive in the draft process, because he did have those assurances. And I have to always try to say, would I have done the same? And given those assurances and, realizing that, I could be traveling all over the country doing runs for everybody, I can't blame him at this point, knowing what I do know now. If that was the case, he was assured of a minimum of being drafted at number 4. And I'm not sure he really wanted to go to any of the first 3 teams. I think he was pretty excited about the Cardinal situation, and he's excited about Arizona. So to find all that out yesterday was an epiphany and a dawning. Feels like a new dawn for me. Because now I can really dig into how talented this young man is, because he's ours now. And to feel secure about that. I just hope there aren't other surprises, since he's challenging the NFL in so many ways down the line. But I think he's probably being influenced pretty heavily by his father. who's got some bones to pick with the NFL, and maybe they're totally legit and whatnot. But there was no doubt. I mean, all doubt was removed when Marvin Harrison Jr. started to explain how excited he is and said blessed to be a Cardinal and to be in this situation where he's very excited to be. So, and reunited with Paris Johnson Jr., that whole thing just feels so good. I was just worried from the start that sometimes when you put so much of your eggs in one basket, it doesn't come through. And, it did. And the commitment, you know, um, from the Cardinals to really be locked in from the get go and have a plan to pull this off, now in retrospect, looks pretty dang clever. If pretty much all of what we've heard through the grapevine, the NFL grapevine, has been accurate. So then that's all come out in the last couple of days. So really excited about that pick, and I'm equally as excited about what the Cardinals did at 27 with Darius Robinson, 6'5", 285, with 35-inch plus arms. He stood out at the Senior Bowl, really made a name for himself there, and he was, in my opinion, an absolute necessity for the Cardinals at 27, because adding an interior pass rusher who can also rush from the edge gives us a Calais Campbell type presence from a draft standpoint that we haven't had since him, I think, at that 34 position. It makes me feel more confident that the Cardinals this time around have a GM who's very understanding of 34 personnel prototypes. I mean, Darius Robinson is a 34 D end. I mean, he's made to order for it. He's got the motor. He's a really good tackler, and he can get after the passer. Someone on Twitter just wrote that something to the effect of that Darius Robinson only had 8 sacks in college. At best, he'll have 4 sacks in the NFL, and that it was a terrible pick. So I chimed right back and said, okay, well, for comparison purposes, at a similar size and similar position in college, and I said, first of all, let's get the record straight. Darius Robinson had 13 sacks in the SEC in his career. Chandler Jones, who I think Monty was in New England when they drafted Chandler Jones. I think Chandler Jones is a very good comp. Chandler Jones was a high draft pick, and I'll tell you what, at Syracuse, he had 10 sacks in his career there. J.J. Watt in Wisconsin. Kyle, guess how many college sacks J.J. Watt had at Wisconsin?
I'm going to go with, call it 30.
It was 11.5.
Okay. Oh, goodness.
So what these kids do in college, playing the interior, and and then being able to diversify more in the pros, you can't. Obviously, those stats will tell you that you can't equate the two, and that plus these are young kids growing into a man's body, and anyone who's been through that knows the growing pains. Once you can fully mature, you can tap out of your at your best physical strength and speed. And what all 3 of these guys have, Darius Robinson is a tremendous work ethic. I mean, I don't know if you saw the clip of him explaining how he prepares for games. I mean, explaining that to anyone would get coaches and GMs to sit up and take notice. I mean, this guy is fully committed to the craft, and he, put it this way, he won't need a homework clause coming in because it's already ingrained in his regiment, weekly regiment, and that's so refreshing. Um, and But I love the size, I love the motor, I love the positional value that we got there because we really need to get pass rush up the middle. Plus, with his size too, being able to bat passes down. Particularly in today's NFL where they want to beat you over the middle. Now I'm hoping at 35 we can get someone who can cover Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, and Kupp, Lockett, and Debo.
I guess for now Debo Samuel, but if you listen to 49er people, it looks like Debo is the one they're more actively trying to shop than Ayuk.
Yeah, and then so cover Ayuk and now cover Pearsall too. So now that he's in the division. But yeah, I'm just really excited how the first day, I'm so excited they didn't trade up. I was so worried about that. I was worried about they would add in the number 35 pick. We're sitting here on night 2 of the draft, and the Cardinals have the 35th pick, which is third. There are some really good corners on the board. Also, Jerzon Newton is still on the board, who I was having a really cool dialogue today with Kevin Murray, who's the young man from the UK who does Cardinals podcasts over there. He was on with Joe Camo and Blake Murphy and Marcos Labrada and Aaron Van B and Jackie. We were all doing the mock Monday, and he was on there sitting there at 2 a.m. in Great Britain. He's a very passionate and well researched Cardinals fan, and I've invited him on Red Rain. See if he can come. It's better for his time. It'd be 3:00 in the afternoon instead of 2 a.m. when we tape these Red Rains. But I was talking to him today, or via messages, and he was wondering about the Darius Robinson pick, and he was hoping for Jerzon Newton there. And we talked about Jerzon Newton's fractured bone in his foot, which I think is a cause for concern because it's a kind of injury that can recur time and time again. It's really hard to protect a foot from and particularly a vulnerable bone in your foot. Particularly while rushing a passer and under duress and in traffic with all the feet and everything. But I think we both came to the consensus that Jerzon would be a safer pick in round 2 than round 1, just because of that. But Jerzon Newton is the most slippery inside pass rusher in this draft, and if the Cardinals, he's still there at 35, I could see the Cardinals doubling down. I mean, wow. I mean, adding him in too. I mean, whoa. So, but what strikes me too about the Darius Robinson pick is what's smart about what Monty's doing is he focused the offseason on interior lines, both on offense and both on defense. He's building inside out, which is what you're supposed to do. And the way Monty handled this first round has skyrocketed my confidence in him. I had some questions about last year's draft, but here's a classic case. Last year, he might have taken Jerzon Newton at 27 with the medical flag. This time he didn't do that. I mean, we've got two players in the first round who don't have histories of medical histories that you have to kind of worry about. Neither is coming off an injury that would preclude him from participating in the off season stuff. So that in itself speaks volumes to where Monty's head is, I believe, and I think Dave Sears is the other wizard behind the curtain. I think he's added a presence there and some football acumen in terms of personnel that we haven't seen in some time. As a combination tag team with Monty, I call them mods, MODS. But it's really exciting because this is kind of the way you go about it. And now we have these 4 picks in. I was saying on my pre-draft stuff that keep all those picks because day 2 can be a draft bonanza. This draft is so deep, particularly at certain positions like wide receiver, cornerback. I mean, that's why it's deep enough at cornerback to where you could take a Jerzon Newton and then come back with a cornerback or 2 over the next 4 picks that they have in the draft. And there's still really good guys in there. I mean, guys you can tap into who can be plug and play starters. There's 4 I'm convinced there's 4 rounds deep of cornerbacks in this draft. I mean, I'm a Boston College guy. We got a kid, Elijah Jones, who had a tremendous season. He turned around games with interceptions. The Virginia game we were losing, big interception. We come back and win. We nearly beat Florida State, and Jones was huge in that game. I mean, this kid can really, really play, and he's not even one of the. I've never seen him in the top 10 of anybody's cornerback rankings, and he'll be there at some point. I mean, that's a guy. If all they do is draft him, I'd be excited. Except that I still think I know we need better help at the slot corner, and that's why I love Mike Sanders still from Michigan. And if the Cardinals have the balls to take him at 35, I would be delirious because here's a guy who he can stick on Lockett, Debo, and Kupp, and he's got that kind of he's got 4.4 speed. He's super agile and flexible in the hips. And kid's a baller, 2-time captain at Michigan. He's my favorite defensive player in this draft. But when I was considering my favorite defensive players, Darius Robinson was one guy on my list that I thought could be a special fit. And so when the pick was made, even though Cooper DeJean was on the board, Kool-Aid, McKinstry, I had such a good feeling about it. And then to hear Darius Robinson explain what makes him tick, and afterwards, and boy, it's a video. If you haven't seen it, I'll try to include it on our thread for the podcast because it is stunning what he does to prepare during a week for a football game. So, with that said, Kyle, what do you think about the Cardinals' approach to day 1?
Well, since we're talking about pick 27 right now, I wasn't as familiar with Darius Robinson going into the draft, and it sounds like, one, they're still committed to Zaven Collins rushing off the edge, which I think is okay. We'll see what happens from there, because obviously they drafted a more hybrid interior, can slide out to the edge type of player, which I know was kind of the profile of BJ Ojulari originally. I think they now kind of see him as the outside linebacker role, but we'll see what comes of that. And then there were so many corners that were on the board at 27 that I'm okay with them passing there to
Right.
wait on drafting cornerback. I would still like if pick 35 is a corner, especially since you still have Cooper DeJean, who fell out of the first round. You still have Enos Rakestraw there. You still have TJ Tampa, all sorts of corners that are available there at 35. That's what I'd like the pick to be for Arizona there today. But
Yeah.
we said coming in, and we talked about it the last couple of weeks, the two biggest needs on defense were pass rushing and cornerback, and they got one of the two. So I can't say it was surprising or anything of those sorts. They got one of the two, and I hope that the next pick ends up going cornerback uh, at the top of round 2 today. And then they have obviously the 3 third-round picks, which
Right.
I think will probably round out that wide receiver room with one of those 3 picks. To your point about the depth of receiver that's still out there and available. I mean, we had 6 first-round quarterbacks, 7 first-round receivers, and you and I can both name about 7 more receivers that are going to get taken within the next 24 hours.
All of whom I think could be the next, many of whom could be the next Puka Nakua. I mean, there's so many good receivers. Malachi Corley, who I mocked for the Cardinals. Wow. I mean, someone's going to get a stud right there.
I mean, even Adonai Mitchell ended up making it to the second round too.
Yeah.
I suspect Lad McConkey's going to be the Buffalo pick at 33, but he made it to the second round of the draft.
Right.
Obviously, Jalen Polk is going to be available probably for the Cardinals in that third round pick. There's Roman Wilson, your guy's still available. There's all sorts of options.
Love Roman Wilson. Absolutely love him.
Not to mention Troy Franklin, who also is down there.
Franklin's there. I mean, I don't know. It's unbelievable. It wouldn't surprise me if the guy that Monty really likes at the top of the second round is a player he thinks won't be taken for a little while. I could see him trading out at 35 to pick up more capital, particularly if it's for adding in a 2025 pick of some sort, as he did with the Titans last year. Mm-hmm. Because of the depth, I could see him doing that. It wouldn't surprise me. But it also wouldn't surprise me if he's locked in on Cooper DeJean, who I know they've done an enormous amount of prep work on. And if DeJean gets past the Bills, which I think you and I both agree, the Bills will take a wide receiver there at 33. And then
I believe it's the Patriots next.
And then or is it the Commanders?
I see Patriots. Patriots 34, Cardinals 35, and then Commandos 36.
Yeah, the Patriots are pretty well set at cornerback. So I like the Cardinals, unless those guys take trade offers, to people who come back up. But man, Cooper DeJean, so versatile, can play everywhere. I mean, he'd be hard to turn down.
Yeah, and I understand your point about trading down because there's such a depth at the position there.
Right.
But if they traded down, it would signal to me that they don't particularly love any of the 4 that are available. And the 4 that I'm kind of thinking of are DeJean, Enos Rakestraw, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and maybe TJ Tampa is the last one. It would kind of signify they don't love any of the 4 or 5, if you want to add some of the other guys in there. And they're essentially saying we're content with any of them. I think that's kind of what Buffalo said with the receivers, kind of like, we're not in love with Xavier Worthy. We're not in love with Ricky Pearsall. We're not in love with Xavier Leggett. So we're okay to drop down and move up in later rounds, essentially, because they weren't in love with any of those guys. But that's not to preclude them from getting a great corner at that top pick. It's just that wouldn't be the person they had targeted from the very beginning if they were willing to trade down. And maybe that neuters some of the excitement a bit, because like you said, they did the same thing last year. They had 33 and they had 33 and 34 going into day 2, and they ended up trading out of both of them. Or after the Houston trade, they had 33 and 34, and both of them ended up getting traded before they ever got to pick them.
One was a part of the trading back up
Yeah.
for Paris Johnson. The other was to Tennessee, who picked Will Levis. And that's why we have a third round pick from Tennessee today. So we'll see how that cashes in.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. We talked about 27 for a sec. My thoughts on Marvin Harrison going number 4. In terms of the stick and pick itself, I was saying from the beginning, regardless of who they pick, whether it's Marvin, whether it's Brock Bowers, whether it's a Dunze, whoever it ends up being, Malik Neighbors or whoever, they should stick and pick at 4 because they don't plan to have a pick higher in the draft than this one at any point in the rebuild. And I mean, I said it going back to the combine. The reason I wasn't worried about Marvin skipping out on any of the stuff is that he is a uniquely gifted prospect who has the privilege of being able to opt out of these events in the NFL's pre-draft cycle because it's not designed for him. He is going to be a top 5 pick no matter what, and he can communicate with those top 5 teams and do all of that. Because he is a gifted prospect who has the privilege to not participate, he chose to not participate and did a lot of training for football season as if this were the end of his rookie season and he's going into year 2 and he's doing mostly football training instead of training for the test, which is the NFL draft. And that's fine that he chose to do that. I wish more prospects had the choice to do that if they so choose. But even someone like Quinyon Mitchell, who knocked out all the tests, elevated his draft stock, killed it at the Senior Bowl, even Quinyon Mitchell fell down to 22 to the Philadelphia Eagles. So a lot of the time you are kind of fighting for your draft position, and that can conflate with dollars and things of those sorts. So I didn't hold it against Marvin for holding out or anything of those sorts. I assume the Cardinals told him from the very beginning, we want you at number 4. But I also think that the Cardinals were keeping their doors open in the event that Drake Maye was the one who fell down to number 4, because it always seemed like the Vikings wanted JJ McCarthy, and there wasn't a whole lot of other teams that were scrambling to get McCarthy. There wouldn't have been as much of a bidding war for him as there was for Drake Maye. And I think once it leaked out Thursday morning that they knew Drake Maye was going to be 3, the Patriots weren't taking offers, were sticking and picking Drake Maye, that's when the Cardinals were like, yes, we are sticking and picking Marvin unless the Vikings bid against themselves and give up 3 first-round picks. But it made all the sense in the world to take Marvin. They stuck, they picked, and I think it's going to work out tremendously well for the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, there's a lot to unpack about what you said and things that I see a little differently. One is, let's just go back to the Darius Robinson, your statement about teams not loving players. I think it's more of an issue of having 4 or 5 players with a similar grade, knowing that you can trade back and 3 or 4 of them will still be there. Is that, like not one guy's maybe separating himself more than the others that they like, which I think was the case with the cornerback situation in this draft. I think it's the case with the wide receiver. It's like Daniel Jeremiah said about wide receivers in this draft: take your flavor, because they're plentiful and there's so many good players. So I don't think it's a matter of not falling in love. I think it's a matter of actually being in love with 4 or 5 players that any which one would fit their mold and they'd feel comfortable with. The thing about Marvin Harrison Jr. is now you're challenging what drew me over to realizing, okay, now I find this acceptable, is the premise that the Cardinals did indeed make assurances to him from the get-go that if you're there at 4, we're taking you. So the thing about trading down and being open for business was actually only contingent on Marvin Harrison being off the board in the first 3 picks. So, otherwise, if Marvin Harrison hadn't had those assurances, as privileged as you may think he is, or others may think he is, I think he took an enormous risk there, um, because of the kind of precedent it could set that may not stick well with the way teams want to, evaluate players postseason, you know, and the kind of the perception that people were worried about, some people, including myself, that this like just spoke of too much entitlement, and like, I've got nothing to prove. Do you guys want me to do anything? That bothers me. For anyone, if any player in a draft comes in feeling like, hey, I'm better than all the rest. I don't have to do what other people have to do because just look at my tape. And I would say, yeah, just don't look at the beginning of the Michigan game.
Yeah.
And don't look at the Notre Dame game where he got blanketed all game. No one gets to come off as a perfect prospect, in my opinion. Not when you haven't played a lick of pro football yet. And I think that the risk that both Marvin Harrison and the Cardinals took was there becoming a perception of Marvin Harrison thinking of himself as privileged and doesn't have to, do the same things other people do. We went through the whole privilege thing with DeAndre Hopkins. It was awful, and it ended up blowing up in the Cardinals' face. But now that I hear behind the scenes what Marvin Harrison was thinking and what he's feeling about the Cardinals, there's a completely different understanding I have of now, that they were willing to take that risk. And look at it this way. That's part of the cleverness of this ruse, is that if you create a bit of a mystique about Marvin Harrison, maybe people aren't going to be as keen on jumping in on him, with the first 3 picks. Because the Cardinals knew of the 3 teams above them, the Patriots were the team most likely, if of any of them, to shift and take Marvin Harrison Jr. Even though their quarterback situation isn't panned out yet. Because I live in this area, and that was talked about. And Paul Bucher was on with us, as Kyle knows, and said if it was his call, he would have taken Marvin Harrison Jr. And he's a devout Patriots fan, and drafted a quarterback later on or something, or kicked the can down the road for another year, going with Brissett and
Is Zappy still there?
Bailey Zappi as QB2. So, but if you're correct that the Cardinals were going to entertain draft trades, even on top of giving Marvin Harrison Jr. Assurances, that just pulls the rug out of the whole thing for me, because you can't promise a kid one thing and then do something different.
What it seems to me is that it wasn't this like grandiose, for 7 weeks they knew with 100% certainty they were taking Marvin. It seems like when Monty is saying we're open for business with a neon sign, as we talked about before, like I don't think that was all a facade or a ruse, because it doesn't serve him to do that. If they know that they're taking Marvin at number 4 and they know that's what they want to do, it doesn't serve him to privately. You can be calling teams and saying we're shopping, and then the Diana Rossinis of the world can report on some of that inside information. But he was coming out publicly and saying we are open for business. Sean Payton, the Broncos coach, said, I'd love to be Monty Austinfort right now, sitting at number 4 with all these teams who want to go up. Like, I don't think that was all a conspiracy or anything of those sorts. It absolutely could have been, like to the point that you brought up, they gave Marvin assurances, but I think they were doing their due diligence and were entertaining offers. I think where it became certain that they kind of gauged the market, and like we talked about earlier, there wasn't really a deep bidding war for JJ McCarthy. It would have been a bidding war for Drake Maye,
Right.
because we know that the Giants wanted Drake Maye, we know that the Vikings wanted Drake Maye, and we know that the Raiders wanted to go up and get Drake Maye. Those had all been reported. And the
Right.
Giants
Well,
basically said once they knew the Patriots were taking Maye, they knew they were sticking and picking a receiver at 6, because it was either Drake Maye or it was the highway.
yeah,
So
but
yeah.
here's why it was to Monty's advantage to do that. In two different ways. First of all, knowing that there was no assurance whatsoever that Marvin Harrison would be there at 4, knowing that they weren't going to be able to trade up, and that was never a matter of question.
Yeah.
And knowing that if he puts the neon sign out there, it could create the impression that we're not so stuck on Marvin that we won't listen to trade offers, which suits his purpose, because then it sends out the message that, oh, wow, well, if the Cardinals aren't that certain on Marvin, should we be? So for anyone else who's interested in coveting Marvin Harrison Jr. and thinking of taking him with the first round pick, if the Cardinals aren't that committed to him, that they're so wide open to business, it could deter other suitors thinking that, wow, that's interesting.
Hmm.
So I think that's a clever part of the ruse here, is that setting up that scenario where the one way in which that it actually would matter is if Marvin Harrison Jr. were taken by the Patriots at 3 or someone else. That's the other wild card, is you don't know who could trade up in front of you to get him.
Hmm.
And if you're this high on that prospect, you want to protect it. So if Monty Offenfort's saying we're open for business to trading down, it would suggest to teams, everybody knows they want to take Marvin Harrison Jr. But if he's that willing, I wonder why. And then you've got this now mystique about Marvin Harrison Jr. during this pre-draft process, where he's basically ghosting the vast majority of the whole thing. He's letting his father speak for him. He's not talking publicly. You create that kind of mystique that might plant just that little seed of doubt. Then, I mean, in a way, it aided and abetted, in a strong way, it aided and abetted the cause for the Cardinals to want to see Marvin Harrison there at 4.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And they didn't know what the Patriots were going to do for certain until the morning of the draft yesterday. That's when it kind of became clear, hey, the Patriots are
Right,
sticking and picking Drake Maye. And
right,
we knew the Patriots were going to take a quarterback. Like at the end of the first round, even if they traded down or something, we knew the Patriots were going to end up with a quarterback at the end of it all. That for the past few weeks had kind of been broadcast through the draft rumors and information and things of those sorts. Everyone kind of knew, hey, the Patriots are going to make sure they get a quarterback here. But if say Marvin had been the 3 pick, either by the Patriots or by someone else, of course that opens up the Cardinals to more options for trade, because well, they don't want to stick at 4 if Marvin isn't there and
correct,
Drake Maye falls to
right,
4, because like we said before, Maye was the
exactly,
one who was getting multiple teams and would have started teams bidding against each other for that top pick, which I think is exactly what would have driven up the price to the point where the Cardinals were comfortable trading down, even if that trade down was 2 spots to the Giants, like the hypothetical trade that you had been throwing out for Azeez Ojulari and the 6th pick and a future second.
right. And here's the thing, and this is why it's smart, is that conversely, if the Cardinals said all along, no, we're sticking, we want Marvin, that would put a neon sign on people's, doorsteps of like, wow, they're so committed to Marvin. Maybe one of us should jump up there and, grab him. And I think that was a legitimate worry all along, was that not being in a close enough position to be able to draft him. And they were, as it turns out, and they were able to protect it by the way that they maneuvered this whole thing.
But
And
everyone did kind of know they were interested in Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Like that was where he was getting consistently mocked to because people were assuming the first three picks were all going to be quarterbacks. So it wasn't like this shocking thing that the Cardinals were interested in Marvin Harrison Jr., though, wasn't it?
no, but when you say neon sign open for business, it emphasizes, we're listening. We want to hear from all of you, and it makes the message clear that it doesn't matter who's there for. If we get the right offer, we're moving out.
Mm-hmm.
But being saying that now, knowing that they've given assurances to Marvin Harrison, it was a ruse. The only way, like you just said, the only way it wasn't a ruse was if Harrison would be gone. So, in a way, they were double protecting it by doing it that way, rather than saying like, "Well, we might feel comfortable just sticking like the Commanders did. We're going to stick,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we're not going to even listen to trade offers because we're going to stick." Instead, by handling it the way that he did, I think it was very protective of both ends. As if someone did trade up in front of them to get Harrison, now you're open to trades because now you've got Drake Maye there. Or if, it also could have planted a seed in people thinking like, wow. Plus, Monty had that history of dealing in the first year. So people might have thought, well, Monty's so trade happy that he'll take the best offer. I thought that might be the case. We
Yeah.
found out yesterday that isn't the case at all. He was planning to stick and make this pick all along. If all of what we've learned and heard is true, and when you connect all those dots, now it makes a lot of sense as to why the Cardinals wouldn't have wanted Marvin Harrison visiting multiple teams. Wouldn't have wanted him to put his numbers out there so that people could jump up in front of them to take him. Wouldn't have wanted all that, and they're willing. And also Harrison was willing to take the risk that if you approach it this way as like the privileged way, if I don't have to do anything and I have nothing to prove, then it might deter people from trying to get up to the top.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Oh, it definitely worked. And we talked about the neon sign thing a second ago and how they were going to be hearing people out. I mean, I suspect that they did their homework and were calling people to gauge their interest or were letting people call them. I presume they did their homework, and what they kind of figured out, which turned out to be true, was that only one team saw JJ McCarthy as their number 4 quarterback of sorts, and it was Minnesota, because the Raiders were interested in Maye and Penix. Obviously, the Falcons were interested in Penix because nobody knew the Falcons were interested in Michael Penix as their quarterback. And the Broncos from the beginning wanted Bo Nix instead of JJ McCarthy. So those teams that would have been bidding for the quarterback 4 were interested in Penix and Nix more so than they were McCarthy, except for Minnesota. But Minnesota wasn't really going to bid against themselves. It was only if Maye, who most people had as their number 2 quarterback, had fallen to Arizona that they would have had more options on the table. And the only scenario that would have played out where the Cardinals are sitting at 4 with Marvin there and Drake Maye on the table is if the Patriots had taken McCarthy at number 3, or I guess Penix, but more likely than not if they had taken McCarthy at number 3. And by the time we got to Thursday, we knew that wasn't the case because we knew the Patriots were sticking and picking Drake Maye. So by that point, by Thursday, the Cardinals, I think, knew they were locked in. They're drafting Marvin. The only thing that I think possibly could have tested that is if McCarthy had been the 3 pick, and now you're sitting there with Marvin at 4, Maye is there, and you're getting calls from 3 different teams that might give you the 3 first-round picks of value that you're looking for. I think they still might have taken Marvin with that pick, even if they had had those 3 first-round pick offers on the table from a team like the Vikings or the Raiders. I think they still might have sticked and picked Marvin Harrison, but they never had to be tested on that theory because Drake Maye was never going to fall to number 4. It was always going to be Patriots taking Maye at 3 as of the last, 48 hours of the draft once we all knew it. And maybe the Patriots had decided on that long before. We don't know how long the Patriots were set in taking Drake Maye at number 3.
Yeah, no, you can't do that. I mean, you can't give a player assurances and then back out of it. And particularly the way it affected how he handled it clearly affected how he handled the pre-draft process. So no, you couldn't do that. You couldn't entertain it. You can't back out then. I mean, that would have been, imagine being Marvin Harrison Sr. if that had happened.
Woo, woo, woo,
I
woo.
mean, right? So, I mean, I
It
don't.
would have been spicy if that had happened. It would have been spicy.
Yeah, the only thing that makes sense to me now, that makes the whole thing crystal clear to me, is this was a cleverly planned draft maneuver in accordance with the Harrisons. That this is how we're going to approach it. We're we're going to give you guarantee we're going to take you if you're on the board at 4, and we think this is the way to go about it. And if you agree, we'll all do it. Plus, I think the dad was delighted to hear this because I think he wanted to, work on football stuff with his son, just as he said to the world on his video. And I think that it pleased the Harrisons. They're fine with it. And that also indicates how, because that also indicates their commitment to the Cardinals, which is really, to me, even more impressive at this point than the Cardinals' commitment to Marvin, because I was worried that the father wouldn't embrace the Cardinals. And, I also was worried that in looking at the Cardinals' current offensive system, that being, who Marvin Harrison Sr. is, he wouldn't have wanted to come into that system in Indianapolis, but he didn't have to. So there was some deterrence there that could have been manifested, except that obviously, by giving them assurances and them reciprocating back and feeling really good about that. And just to see the relief on Marvin Harrison Jr.'s face last night, and to see how happy he was to be a Cardinal and how excited he is about Kyler and about reuniting with Paris Johnson Jr. The whole thing of that just seemed like a giant exhale, and so happy this all worked out the way it did. And the fact that that was the case coming through all this, just wow, it just felt such a relief, and now a vote of confidence in what they were doing all along. So, wow. I mean, without that, if it all was up to chance and they didn't have that agreement, I'd still be like feeling weird about it. But finally, I feel like, wow, I get it now. I get it. That still doesn't mean, he would have been my pick, because I did fall in love with Roman Dunze in the draft process. I think that guy's going to be special, but there's no reason why all 3. And I think Neighbors is going to be special. I think there's no reason why all 3 can't be special. And like Daniel Jeremiah said, take the flavor that you like best. And clearly the Cardinals that were locked in for 2 years on this kid for many outstanding reasons. I mean, he's got the work ethic, he's got the pedigree, he's got the talent. And now, they managed to get this done, and there's no more speculation. Hopefully, Marvin Harrison Jr. signs the agreement so that people can buy his jersey. And when he decides on a number, BJ Ojulari currently has 18, but something might be worked out to a little financial agreement there to get MHJ in 18 if that's what he wants, or maybe he's targeting another number. So, wow, really excited about 4 picks for the Cardinals tonight, and be an interesting conversation Kyle and I are going to pick this up on Monday morning, where we will review the entire draft and the free agent signings by then, and review the whole thing. I have invited Kevin Murray from UKK1, I call from the UK, to join us. I'll see if he can hop in there with us on Monday. But whether he does or not, I hope you enjoy this draft, as exciting as it was last night, and what's to come. And wow, just so happy that there seems to be uh, some real clarity today as to what was going on behind the scenes. And yeah, any final thoughts, Kyle?
I am excited to rejoin you on Monday because I feel like there is going to be a lot to discuss with the Cardinals. 4 picks in the next 24 hours, a bunch of day 3 picks that I'm sure will have some sort of implications. Altogether, I'm happy with the results, and I'm super excited that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be an Arizona Cardinal. When I saw the pick come through, it was a big old fist pump for me in my living room, and my brother, who's a big time Arizona Cardinals fan as well, is also very enthusiastic about Marvin Harrison Jr. being the pick for Arizona. So we'll see what happens the rest of this draft, because I am incredibly excited to see him and McBride and Wilson and Dortch all together in that
Right.
receiving room with potentially Walter's favorite draft prospect of all time, Roman Wilson.
Well, not all the time. I love that kid. So, but and kudos to the Little Rock. No wonder why his draft plan was, I think, our behind Brett Coleman, our most heavily viewed podcast of this off season, where once again Little Rock nails the first round pick. He had Marvin Harrison Jr. He also had Chris Jones signing with the Cardinals, but
I know
it
they
turns
never.
out,
No.
the Chiefs took care of that, and that's not Kyle's fault. At that time, there was speculation he might be hitting the market, but he got, he got the Harrison thing right. He's gotten a lot of the things right. Who else did you have right
I had
in your?
Jonah Williams. Jonah
Yeah,
Williams is
you
the
did.
starting right tackle.
See that he had Jonah Wood. See, Kyle's got a blueprint on our offense going now. And all right, Kyle, put the pressure on you. Who's going to be the 35 pick for the Cardinals?
35. I still hope it's Kool-Aid. I don't think it's going to be, but I still am hoping it's going to be Kool-Aid McKinstry. Um, I'll say Cooper DeJean, just because he's the best
Yep,
corner available on the board right now. And then
yep.
with one of those third round picks, I'll say this: eventually we're gonna get one of your Washington boys. It might be McMillan, it might be Jalen Polk, but we're gonna get one of your
Ooh.
Washington boys.
Oh man, I'm loving this. I am loving this. Oh boy. See, so we got some magic going here with the Little Rock. That Little Rock might be a crystal ball after all. So, stay tuned, fans. So excited that he's excited, and he's tuned in on this. And who knows, we might even convert this ex-Chargers fan into being a Cardinal fan like his brother. So that's part of our agenda here, and that's going to be part of my draft day maneuverings for the next 3 days to convert Kyle. But anyway, we're so pleased you could join us today, and hope you're as excited as we are. And I'm excited about tonight, and looking forward to recapping the whole draft with you on Monday. So in the interim, may the red rain shower down on you into the red, red sea. Red rain.